study showed us that members had 30 days to pay their fees after assignment of IP block. For a lot of countries paying by Forex, we need to have invoices and then receive authorization from the ministry, and it's very hard to get this from Mauritius. So regularly we this might go beyond 30 days, and this is something that should be taken into consideration in AFRINIC. For a lot of people, it's not that they are not willing to pay, but rather these regulatory issues regarding legislation in our countries.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. I'll respond in English that way. The allocation fees were implemented last year, if I'm not mistaken, and what we have observed is very few members were unable to meet that deadline. I can look up the stats and show it later, but that's the reality. I've stated out the reality, the operational implications, not at AFRINIC level, at our members level, okay, in regard to the IPv4 allocation request that they will be sending to AFRINIC. The members will definitely have to take note of the 30 days and see how they can work within the organization, or better, deploy IPv6. Those who already have their prefix, you're not paying a single dollar extra to AFRINIC. It was given to you for free, and all you have to do is deploy it. For those who will come to get the IPv6 resources, as far as I'm aware, they will be getting it. You have IPv4, you come and ask for your IPv6, and we'll give it to you. Where then there's no allocation fee invoice that will be issued to them, because they're getting it for free for the time being. Nothing has changed, and all they need to do is deploy it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Madhvi. I'd like to add a little to that, but before I do, let me say that the microphone line is now closed. I said I'd accept 4 questions, and I see the 4 there. So now my addition to what Madhvi said, that 30 days is not a hard deadline. If you can't meet the 30 days, there are no penalties, there are no real adverse consequences. You can just inform AFRINIC that you're having trouble paying in time, and we will simply delay the issue of the resources. Okay, thanks. Okay, next question, Owen.
Owen DeLong, Akamai. This one's for Mukom, and you say you're going to continue training, and not to put it too bluntly, but the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing, expecting different results. So hopefully you're going to change the training a little bit, and you're going to start training managers and executives on why IPv6 needs to be a priority in their organization. Because as near as I can tell, that is the training that is lacking. That is the #1 factor, and you've agreed with it in your presentation. The #1 factor delaying IPv6 adoption is that management is not recognizing the need to make it a priority. It doesn't bring additional revenue, it doesn't add to the bottom line, and they don't really realize that they're driving towards a cliff and that the revenue is going to fall off if they don't implement v6. So I think we need to get that message out to management better, and I hope that your new training programs will address that.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. We're 100% in agreement with that. We've had a training course for IPv6 we call it strategy and planning, for managers for 3 years now. And so we're going to ramp that up so that we really drive home the message that, one, how do you place IPv6 strategically? And also, how do you help your engineers make sure that they actually get it deployed? So watch out on our website. So from next year, it's one of the trainings that any local host will be able to just tick a box and request, like we currently do for v4. And back to doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yes, some of it is just necessary because a couple of people would have moved from the original companies. But this time, for example, what we plan to do is, for every single person that we've trained, we plan to have some kind of follow-up like you've had with some of the online entrepreneurs, step-by-step things, bugging you every month, things you could actually start doing to put that learning into practice. Yeah, and of course, we'll scale that up with e-learning. So therefore, we could everyone do the foundations online, and then when we come to site, it's only for people that have actually started doing something, and then we could do something more advanced.
Noah Maina here from CCOM. Mukom, I would like to recommend to you that for your training programs, try to reach out to operators who have deployed IPv6 in an operational network and see if they can help basically improve your training program.
Thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question. Please go ahead.
My name is Christophe from the DRC. I wanted to ask a question regarding the themes that you've talked about here. There are another forum where you targeted government. You said you targeted governments for strategies of deploying IPv6. But I believe that in the Francophone country, there is an issue of communication that you're going to have. If today, if you go in what is in all the official communication from AFRINIC, they are in English. But most of the decision makers in the Francophone countries don't speak English, and sometimes they have difficulties with these technical terms. So there's a team, yes, that can help them, but the decision makers, when we have decision makers, they don't understand these official documents, and so this is what makes us a little bit get late. So we need to actually look at this approach. It could help because there are a certain number of countries where in the public service these could actually slow down things. And with regard to the strategies that you gave some new strategies, I would also say that amongst the targeted strategies, most of IPs in Africa were combined. We have mobile operators who are also IPs. Why don't you target big groups that are already in several countries? When you have TN, Orange, if you manage to work with them, you will manage to be able to move forward. If you target 5 or 6 countries, instead of targeting one country at a time, you can target these operators that are present in different countries. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in French if it's not my mother tongue. All the training material in AFRINIC is both in English and in French. All our trainings are either for engineers, or for managers, for decision makers, are in the 2 languages. We are going to put more efforts to undertake trainings in Francophone countries, and these trainings are going to take place in French. There's no excuse, actually. All the material that we have within AFRINIC is at the same time in English and in French. With regard to your suggestion, working with these big operators, it's a wonderful suggestion, and it's welcome.
Okay. Thanks, Mukom. Right, I said I'd take 4 questions, but I see question number 5 is lined up at the microphone. If you keep it very short, sir, I will accept your question or comment.
Bonjour.
Good morning. Mahmoud Kaba from Guinea, Conakry. I would just like to talk about a concern. On the map that you showed, I noticed that you said AFRINIC and AFNOG trained 2,000 engineers, more than 2,000 engineers in Africa, and from the map that you showed, it shows that almost all countries were covered by this training, but I've just noticed that there's a black point in Guinea, so it shows that you did not come to this country. So I'm going back on the 3rd of June. I'm going to would like to assure you that from the 15th of June, we'll able to welcome you to come and train our engineers. Thank you very much for your question. In fact, this year we have programmed our training in Guinea. If you go to our website, Guinea is going to be taken into consideration this year. Alan.
We have a question from the remote participants. Matthew from Covenant University, Nigeria. I think the question is to Mukom. In the course of implementation of IPv6, are we being guaranteed of technical support from AFRINIC without any fee?
That's an interesting question. Within the team, we are trying to set up some sort of a help desk, but definitely it cannot scale. Our working principle is that there must be skin in the game. You must be willing to put in the sweat equity to solve your own problems. We'll just help. And of course, free of charge, yes.
Alan, sorry.
One more.
I have one clarification to Matthew Paonesa's regarding the invoices. We have generated statistics since October 2014 until now, a total of only 52 invoices, new member and additional resource requests expired. So the numbers are really small, I'd say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madhvi. Okay, that brings us to the end of the presentations on interesting projects and things that staff have been working on. The next item on our agenda is a presentation from Jan Scholte about what will happen after the IANA transition, who controls the global internet. So I ask staff to please leave the podium to make space for Jan.
Right, now for some relief from the technical and financial details. Good day, bonjour. Thank you very much, AFRINIC and Africa Internet Summit for welcoming me here. My name is Jan Scholte. I work at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. I was one of the advisors to the accountability stream of the IANA transition, and so sat at the inside of the proceedings in good part, and indeed had conversations with many of you, for which I'm thankful, though you are not responsible for what I'm about to say in the rest of this presentation. No, I was quite interested in this IANA transition because it was made out as a change of power in global internet governance. The US government, Department of Commerce, would withdraw, and in its place one moved to the multi-stakeholder community and the IANA operations based at ICANN. This is ICANN's headquarters, in case you haven't been there. So I was wondering what actually was happening here. Where was power shifting in the IANA transition? Where was it shifting in terms of the state governments and US government? How was it shifting in terms of networks and the multi-stakeholder community? How was power changing in terms of the material relations of the global economy? And how was power changing in terms of the ideas that really shape us and make things happen? So I'm just going to say a few things on each of those points. If it will change, there you go. State power. The US government withdrew with the IANA, withdrew its contracting authority over the IANA functions in this IANA transition. But was this the end of US government power? I mean, one thing that was quite striking to me actually is that the US government mostly controlled its loss of control. So where the control lay at the end of all that, I'm not quite sure. But the US government did set the timing, largely set the timing and the conditions of the IANA handover. And it tightly monitored, and I can say from direct experience, also intervened at certain points, also behind the scenes, when things were not necessarily proceeding quite as expected. And then at the end of it all, the US government, of course, had the single final veto, if you like, on agreeing on what the new arrangements would be. The post-transition, the transition involves a retreat of US power to some extent, but it also leaves in place considerable US power as well. The US government diplomatically and US-based companies commercially, I think, are quite happy to see the albatross of the IANA contract removed. Likewise, a lot of resistance that was coming from the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, at the old regime, the transition largely took away a lot of that agitation. And indeed, the government of China and the government of India, to varying degrees, bought into a multi-stakeholder regime or principle that they didn't endorse before. ICANN headquarters remains in Los Angeles, and everything still remains under the state of California law, to the general agreement of the worldwide community. ICANN staff is still largely US, and the board is still largely European American. The root zone management agreement remains with VeriSign outside Washington, D.C. 10 of the 13 core root servers still in the United States, and the root signing key is still in California and Virginia. So this is overemphasized perhaps, but just to say that it's not a disappearance of US power with the IANA transition. At the same time, there's a rise of a multi-stakeholder community, for sure. And you might call that a certain network power, an elite that has taken on much of the policy-making competence within the IANA sphere. But it's an elite, which is also power. So within the discussions in this room, we hear all the time bottom up, bottom up, bottom up, but it's bottom up within an elite network. It's not bottom up within the wider society, one could argue. So, well, I'm glad to hear the chuckles. If you have a little bit of self-reflection there. But, okay, but there is an elite network that has consolidated considerably with the IANA transition. And the IANA transition process has been really important for getting these civil society, business, government, technical people to talk with each other and to work closely together in major global policy issues. And I would say the US government largely set the terms and the conditions of the IANA transition, but the actual detailed arrangements were very much from the multi-stakeholder community, this new empowered community. And some of the provisions that have come out of the IANA transition do depart considerably from what the US government necessarily anticipated or wanted. So you could say that it was, on the one hand, the US government, and on the other hand, this multi-stakeholder empowered community that together were having the power to make this new arrangement come out. Oops. But again, I just want to underline the power hierarchies within the empowered community. It's empowered, but some people are more empowered than others, maybe one could say. Yeah? Some countries and regions, geopolitically, within the empowered community are in a stronger position. There are social hierarchies. Older generations stronger, property classes stronger, men on the whole stronger, people of color in the global arrangements often on the sidelines. There are cultural hierarchies. We just had a comment again on the linguistic aspect. Yes, lots of effort being done towards multilingualism, but English still very, very powerful. The mindset, I mean, the last couple of presentations that we had, beyond me, I was disempowered. If you don't know the technical details, you're in trouble. And so there's those kind of cultural power hierarchies within the multi-stakeholder community as well. The other thing, maybe this is so subtle that it doesn't even want saying, but the power of a commodification of the internet and a capitalist order of the internet, that coming through very strongly out of the IANA transition. We probably forget that the internet of 25 years ago was not commodified. There was not commodification of domain names, that they were the marketplace bought and sold. There was not a commodification of numbers. We've had a lot of discussion in this meeting about the transfer markets in IPv4 addresses and so on. The protocols regime is very much underpinned by a lot of commercial interests and so on. And that power of the commercial business aspect of the internet is very strongly reinforced with the IANA transition. And then just ideas. Maybe you don't spend time thinking about this, but as I've been going through, watching this IANA transition and after, I keep listening to people and thinking, what are the ideas that give policy makers and policy players in the internet space power? And I notice these kinds of phrases that come out a lot and give quite, they're interesting. Also for the phrases that do not give people power in the internet space. Security, stability, resilience, they are named, that phrase comes up over 100 times in the final IANA documents. So very much so, if your governance provides security, stability, resilience, that's what people want. That's what gives people power. But just to give a contrary example, if you name sovereignty, for example, in the internet spaces, that is the IANA function space, that will not give you any power at all. Indeed, it's not recognized as a powerful idea at all. Multi-stakeholder governance, multi-stakeholder model, again, a phrase repeated over and over to the point that when people hear it, they automatically assume that it's good. I'm not saying that it's not good, but it's interesting that something which 20 years ago no one would have listened to, now is everyone shakes their head and says, yes, of course, this is the way we should do things. Market efficiency and growth, again, I don't say have anything necessarily against it, but that is the main line. And you do not hear too much discussion. It was interesting a couple of days ago in this room when people were talking about the soft landing, and there were issues about distributive justice which came in. And you realize that the discussion about distribution and justice is very much on the sidelines of global internet governance in the IANA space. It comes up occasionally, and then people get into a political argument. But on the whole, it's about market efficiency and growth. The last point about language is the human rights. Those of you who've been in the internet space for a good while know that human rights was